This is the continuation of Unix APIs and different types of functions we are using to perform the operations and commands, how they are performed when they are called for execution, what are all the parameters, how those things are changed within the given specified function that we are discussed here. Here we will discuss about STAT, fstat functions, nothing but get information about a file. These functions retrieve the file attributes of a given file. The first argument of STAT file is a path name, where as fstat the file descriptors. The prototype is given below. That includes two header files. One is system or the typed header file. Second one is standard header file. The function stat that returns integer type, there it contains two parameters. One is of a character that refers a path name. Second is that indicate what are the structure that contain stat variable. Second one, that fstat that returns the value in the form of integer. This also contains two parameters. One is integer type, a constant value about a file descriptor. Second one, structure variable or a structure stat with the stat variable. Here the second argument to start and fstat is the address of structure stat typed variables. That always refers where the structure is there, that address is identified. We will discuss stat. Int stat that contains two parameters. One is constant character of the path name. Second one, structure with stat structure with another parameter. This function returns integer is a value, and it contains information about file pointed to by a path name. And then read, write or execution permission for named file is not required, but all directories listed in the path name leading to the file must be searchable. Nothing but you want to go for identify the file with the corresponding name. For that you want to set a path name for that stat functions. Second one, fstat. This function also returns integer type value, and it contains two parameters. One is integer of file descriptor. Second one is structure stat that obtain the same information about an open file known by file descriptor fd. Int lstat that contains constant a character value, and also it contains structure variable of buf, nothing but buffer, like stat, except that if named file is symbolic link, lstat function returns information about the link, while STIT returns information about the file, the link, reference. Here we discuss about what are all the variables available in the structure STIT. ST obviously the keyword, and then STIT the name of the structure, and what are all the different types of variables we are declared within that structure. First one, file system ID. The system ID is defined first with the variable tdvs. Second one, file inode, that directly identify the corresponding file. Next one contains file type and access flags. What type of file that is mentioned, and also what are all the flags are required to completion of that file. They are mentioned in that variable mode type variable. Then how to set hard link for a corresponding file. For that we are using stnlink is the variable. Next one, what are the different types of IDs are there? User ID, group ID, right? Other things should be identified. For that we are using UID that identifies user ID, GID that refers group ID. Next we are discuss about contain major and minor device numbers, which are all the devices are contained for that which are considered as a major, remaining are considered for minor devices, and those numbers are identified. Then what is the buffer size required? The file size should be mentioned in the form of bytes. For that we are using OFFT that set the buffer size of the file. Next one, lost access time, that indicate what is the lost priority or the previous update of existing file should be considered. That's called lost access time. Initially it takes the time, later you want to go for change that access, means that should be considered, which is the last attempt to made by that file with the timestamp. Next is lost modification time. Nothing but to consider what is the updation should be done, that should be mentioned as a last modification time. Next one is lost status change time, means what identify the status with the corresponding time setting, finally end with the corresponding structure. The return value of both functions is 0 if succeed, otherwise -1 if it is fails. Possible failure may be that a given file path name of a file descriptor is invalid. The calling process lacks permission to access the file, or the function interrupted by a signal. If path name argument specified to start STIT is a symbolic link file, STIT will resolve the link and access the non-symbolic link file. Both functions cannot be used to obtain the attribute symbolic link file. Here we discuss about access functions. The access function checks the existing and or access permission of user to named file. The prototype is given below, that include a file, and return type is integer that contain two variables. One is of type character with a constant, second is integer of what are different types of flags are required to access permissions. Path name is the path name of a given file, the flag that contains one or more of the flag bits. We discuss about what are different types of flags are used for these operations. One is FOK that checks whether the named file exists or not. Another one is ROK that checks a calling process has read permission or not. WOK that checks whether the calling process has write permission or not. XOK that checks whether the calling process has execution permission is given or not. The flag argument's value to access call is composed by a bitwise ORing one or more of the above bit flags. The following statement checks whether a user has read or write permission on a file. The following statement checks whether a user has read and write permission on a file. That access is considered R-OK or W-OK with the corresponding function access, and it assigned to the integer type value or C. If a flag of FOK, the function returns 0 if the flag exists and -1 otherwise. If a flag value is any combination of R_OK, W_OK and X_OK, that is read access is OK, write access is OK and execution access is OK, the access function uses the calling process real user ID and group user ID to check against the file user ID and group user ID. The function returns 0 if all the requested permission is permitted and -1 otherwise. The program uses to access to determine for each command line argument whether a named file exists. If named file does not exist, it will create and initialize with a character string hello world. Here we discuss about two different functions, chmod and fcmod functions. These function checks the file access permissions for owner, group and others, and also sets UID, nothing but user ID, set GID, nothing but group ID, and sticky flags which are required for identification. A process that calls one of these functions should have the effective user ID of either of the super user or the owner of the file. The prototype is given below that returns integer type for chmod change mode that contains two parameters. One is of a character with the corresponding path name, and second one is which are all the modes are required with the flags. And then second function, it is integer That return type is integer type of f change mode. This also contains one is integer type, one more is flags. Integer type is a file descriptor. Second one is which are all the flags are required to go for set the changes. The chmod function uses path name of a file as a first argument, whereas fchmod uses file descriptor fdesc as the first argument. Here the first is the path name, set the path name. Second one, what is the file descriptor is required. A flag argument contains a new access permission and any special flags to be set on the given file. Usually we will consider some of the examples of how to set the user ID and examples of how to set the user ID. The following function turns on the set of user ID flags, removes group write permissions, and others read and execute permission on a file is named in given path. For that we are using three different flags. One is write, one is read, one more is execute. For that we call the structure STIT of STATV name, STIT of a variable name, and then you want to set with the program. Start with the first parameter, set the path. Second one is the given structure. If it is set that, then it is called stat, else you can call a flags for setting the IDs that is mentioned in this program. Here we will discuss about three different functions. One is chown and fchown function changes the user ID and group ID of files. They differ only in their first arguments with refer to the type of files, either a path name or a file descriptor. The third function lchown, nothing but changes the ownership of symbolic link file. The chown function changes the ownership of the file to which the symbolic link file refers. The function prototype is given below. These functions are what type of return value? All three are written in the form of integer type, but they are using a common variable path name, and second function that is file descriptor. Third one is once again back to the path name of the given function. Here path name is the path name of a given file. UID specifies new user ID to be assigned to the file. JID, nothing but group ID, specifies new group ID to be assigned to the file. And if actual value of UID and JID is -1, the ID of a file is not changed. Here we discuss utime function modifies the access and modification timestamp of a file. The prototype is given below. That includes system or type header file, predefined utime file, then common of standard header file. Utime function returns integer type and it contains a path name and a times as a parameters. The first one is the path name that returns is the path name of a file that address is mentioned. Second one is time is a parameter argument specifies new access time and what the modification time for the file is mentioned. Here the structure contains utime buffer. This contains the variables, two different variables. One is access time, second one is modified time, are two variables of the given structure.